The notification came through at 7:14 in the morning, and it said, "Can't stop thinking about last night." My husband was in the shower. The water was still running. I could hear it. I set his Apple Watch back down on the nightstand exactly where I had found it, face up, the way he always left it. I walked to the kitchen. I put the kettle on. I stood there with both hands flat on the counter, and I did not move for a long time. Welcome back to Ravage Stories, where secrets come out, betrayals get exposed, and the people who thought they'd get away with it never do. If you're new here, subscribe, join the family. You're going to want to be here for what comes next. Drop a comment where you are listening from. It means a lot to me. Now let's go. My name is Deanna Marsh. I was 37 years old when this happened, and I want to be precise about that number, because 37 feels like an age where you're supposed to have figured out at least the basics. You're supposed to know who is safe and who is not. I grew up in central Wisconsin, not Madison, not Milwaukee, the part that people drive through without stopping. My mother cleaned houses on Tuesdays and Thursdays and sold preserves at the county fair and wore the same winter coat for 11 years because she said it still had good life left in it. My father worked the line at the paper mill in Neenah until the mill restructured, and after that he did what a lot of men in that county did, which is he found other work and did not complain about it in front of us. I tell you this not for sympathy. I tell you this because it matters. The way I was raised meant I understood the value of something earned. Every dollar, every year, every hour of loyalty given to another person as though it were a legal document, signed and witnessed and final. I met Daniel Marsh at 24. He was 28. He had just started at an architectural firm in Green Bay, and I was working as an office administrator for a property management company and taking paralegal certification courses at night because I wanted something more, and I was willing to build it one slow increment at a time. We dated for 2 years. We got married in September in a small ceremony at a park shelter because the venue deposits required money we did not have, and I thought it was beautiful. My mother wore her navy blouse, the one she reserved for important occasions. She had pressed it the night before. I remember watching her smooth the collar with the flat of her hand before she walked to her seat, and I thought, everything I need to know about love I learned from watching that woman prepare for things that mattered. Daniel and I built what most people would call a solid life. Not spectacular, solid. We bought a house in Appleton, a 1970s split level that needed work, and we did the work ourselves on weekends for 3 years until it looked like something we were proud of. He advanced at the firm. I got my paralegal certification, then a position at a mid-sized civil litigation firm where I processed discovery documents and drafted demand letters and watched enough attorneys work closely enough that I started to understand how the machine ran. We talked about children and decided to wait a little longer, and then a little longer after that, and eventually the conversation shifted into something we circled without landing on, and I told myself that was fine because we had time and we had each other, and that was the foundation. Our 12th anniversary was in September. Daniel suggested a party, not just dinner, a party. He said he wanted to celebrate properly, said 12 years was something worth marking. He was enthusiastic in a way that I now understand differently. At the time, I thought it was romantic. He said he would plan most of it himself, take the pressure off me. He booked a private room at a restaurant in downtown Appleton, sent invitations to about 40 people, friends, colleagues, both our families. His coworker Stephanie would be there. She had been at the firm for 2 years. I had met her at their office holiday gathering the previous December. She had very good posture, and she laughed at everything Daniel said, and I remember thinking, idly, the way you think things you don't examine, that she seemed to position herself near him often. I filed it and forgot it. That is the thing about the details that are trying to tell you something. They're patient. They will wait. The morning I found the notification, it was 6 weeks before the anniversary party. I stood at that counter until the kettle began to scream. Then I poured the water and made the tea, and when Daniel came out of the bathroom in his work clothes, I handed him his travel mug and said to have a good day. He kissed me on the cheek. I felt absolutely nothing except a cold, organizing clarity that I did not have a name for yet. I want to tell you what I did not do. I did not cry. I did not confront him. I did not call my best friend and fall apart. Every instinct that I had was shaped by 13 years of watching civil litigation proceed, and what I understood in that kitchen, with the tea going cold in my hand, was that you do not show your cards before you have the rest of the deck. I also want to tell you what I did do. I got dressed. I went to work. I sat at my desk and I opened a new folder in my Google Drive and I titled it simply with the date. That folder would grow. It always does. The days after that first notification had a texture I cannot fully describe. Everything looked the same and nothing was. I started paying attention in the way that I suspect investigators pay attention, which is to say, without effect, without agenda, collecting only what was there. Daniel kept his Apple Watch on the charger by the bed every night. He had always done this. I had never had reason to look at it before. Now I understood that I had access to a live feed of information every single morning during his shower, which ran exactly 11 minutes because Daniel was a creature of precise routine, and I began to use those 11 minutes the way I used everything in my professional life, methodically. The messages were deleted from his phone. He was careful about that. But the watch synced notifications in real time before he could manage them, and in those 11 minutes each morning, I was able to photograph what appeared with my own phone before he came out. Stephanie's contact name in his phone was listed as Hank. I noticed this the second morning. Hank. It was so ordinary and so deliberate that I almost laughed, standing there in the gray light of our bedroom with my phone camera aimed at his wristwatch like a woman photographing evidence at a crime scene, which is, I suppose, exactly what I was. Over the following 3 weeks, I documented 41 messages. A hotel in Oshkosh, a Thursday afternoon when he told me he had a client site visit, references to inside jokes I did not know. One message where she wrote that she wished they didn't have to pretend, and he responded with a single word, soon. I photographed that one, and then I put my phone face down on the bed and I sat very still for a moment. Soon. A timeline. Something he was planning. I put it in the folder. I need to tell you about the folder the way it matters. It started as a Google Drive document. Within 2 weeks, it had migrated into a physical accordion folder that I bought at an office supply store and kept in the trunk of my car inside a canvas tote bag under the emergency kit. At work, I had access to case management software and court filing databases, and I began to use what I knew, not dramatically, not recklessly, but with the careful patience of someone who had spent years watching attorneys build arguments the way you build stone walls, one piece fitted against the next. The folder held printed screenshots, each one dated and labeled. It held a timeline I drafted myself in the style of the litigation chronologies I produced at work. It held a note I had written to myself at the top of the first page that said only, "Stay composed." By week 4, my friend Renata knew. Renata has been my closest friend since we were assigned to adjacent cubicles at a temp job when we were both 22. She is the kind of woman who laughs loudly and asks direct questions and cries at commercials about dogs. And she is also, when the situation requires it, made of absolute iron. I told her over coffee at her kitchen table on a Wednesday evening, and I watched her face move through several distinct phases in about 90 seconds. Then she put both hands around her mug and she said, "What do you need from me?" Not "what are you going to do?" Not "I can't believe him." Not "you poor thing." What do you need from me? I have been grateful for that sentence every day since. I told her I wasn't ready to move yet. I told her I needed a witness. I told her I thought I knew what Daniel was planning, and I needed her to help me figure out if I was right. Because here is what had been settling in my mind like sediment, slow and quiet and impossible to ignore once it reached the bottom. Daniel had planned the anniversary party. He had planned it with significant enthusiasm. He had paid the deposit himself, from the joint account, which he rarely touched without discussing it with me first. And about 10 days after I found the first notification, I had come across a document on our shared home computer, not hidden, just minimized in the taskbar, that was a property listing inquiry. A new construction condo in a development called Riverton Commons. 2 bedrooms. Daniel's email address in the contact field. I did not touch the document. I took a photograph of the screen. I put it in the folder. Renata and I sat with this for a long time. She said quietly that she thought she understood what I was thinking. She said it like a question. I said yes. The party was not a celebration. The party was a staging ground. He was going to use our 12th anniversary in a room full of 40 people, including both our families, to announce something. The condo inquiry told me he was already preparing for an exit. The soon told me he had a timeline. The party told me he had chosen his moment, and he had chosen to make it public. And I believe, though I cannot prove this, that he chose public because he thought it would make me smaller, that in front of 40 people I would not be able to be anything except diminished. He did not know who he was dealing with. I want to pause here because I need you to understand something about what I was carrying during these weeks. I was going to work every morning. I was processing discovery documents. I was drafting correspondence. I was coming home and making dinner and sitting across the table from this man and having the kind of ordinary conversation that 12 years of shared life generates automatically, like background noise you stop hearing. I was doing all of this while holding the full weight of what I knew and he didn't know I knew. And I am not going to tell you that was easy. I am going to tell you that there were nights when I sat in my car in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside because I needed to recalibrate. I would sit with my hands in my lap and breathe until I felt like myself again, and then I would pick up my bag and go in and I would be fine. My mother called during this period. She called, as she always did, on Sunday evenings. She asked how I was. I said, "Good, Mom, just busy." She said, "You sound tired, baby." I said I was fine. She has a way of sitting with silence on the phone that communicates more than most people's sentences. We sat in it together for a moment. Then she said, "You know that sometimes the brave thing and the right thing are exactly the same thing?" I don't know what made her say it. She says things like that sometimes. I wrote it on the back of the folder. 2 weeks before the party, I called an attorney. Not anyone from my firm. I did not want proximity to my professional life coloring the advice I received. I called a family law attorney in Oshkosh, a woman named Patricia Harlow, whose name I had seen on briefs and whose reputation in the regional legal community was efficient, which in family law means she does not allow herself or her clients to be moved off position by sentiment. I told her what I had. She told me what I needed. Wisconsin is a community property state, which meant that the 12 years of accumulated joint assets, the house we had worked on with our own hands for 3 years, the retirement accounts, the savings, were not simply his to walk away from. More importantly, she told me that if I had documentation of an ongoing relationship conducted using shared resources, and the hotel in Oshkosh paid on the joint credit card, qualified, there were civil recovery arguments worth making alongside the divorce filing. We talked for an hour. I took notes on a legal pad. I put the notes in the folder. Patricia also told me something I had not considered, which is that the timing of when I filed relative to when Daniel might file would matter significantly. She said, "Do not let him control the calendar." She did not need to explain further. I understood calendars. I also understood suddenly, with the precision of something clicking into alignment, that the anniversary party date was now working for me, not against me. He thought he had chosen the moment. He had given me a fixed point on a timeline that I could prepare for with 6 weeks of notice. I thought about that on the drive back to Appleton, and I felt something I can only describe as a door opening. I want to tell you about Renata's role in the next 2 weeks because it matters and because she deserves it. Renata worked as an office coordinator for a commercial real estate company, and she had, over 15 years in that job, developed a comprehensive understanding of how property records worked in Wisconsin, which county recorder offices held what, and how to pull documentation from public databases without triggering any flags that someone was looking. At my request, she pulled the full mortgage record on our house, the current assessed value, and cross-referenced it against the Riverton Commons development to establish the price point Daniel had been researching. She did this on her lunch break on a Tuesday and sent me a 3-paragraph summary in a text message that she then deleted from her phone on my advice. She also, at my request and with my written authorization, contacted our joint bank and requested a 60-day transaction history under my account rights as a co-holder. She drove to the branch in person. She said the teller was younger than her youngest nephew and gave her a lollipop with the paperwork, which she accepted with full dignity and then absolutely roasted in a text to me approximately 8 minutes later. That detail, the lollipop, is the first time I laughed in 6 weeks. A real laugh, the kind that starts in your chest and doesn't apologize for itself. I was sitting in my car in the parking lot at work when I read it, and I laughed until my eyes watered. And then I sat there for another minute and let the feeling finish whatever it needed to finish, and then I went back inside. The transaction history confirmed the hotel charge. It also confirmed 3 restaurant charges on Thursday evenings that coincided with 3 separate client site visits Daniel had mentioned to me. The amount of effort he had invested in the logistical architecture of the deception was, from a purely structural standpoint, impressive. I noted this without emotion. It went in the folder. The night before the party, I sat at the kitchen table after Daniel had gone to bed, and I opened the accordion folder and I read through the entire timeline, beginning to end. 41 photographed messages, hotel documentation, transaction records, the property inquiry screenshot, Patricia Harlow's notes, the certified mail receipt from the divorce petition I had signed and had prepared, which Patricia was holding in her office and which would be filed electronically at 9 the following morning, while Daniel and I were still at breakfast before the party began. He would not know this yet when we arrived at the restaurant. The filing timestamp would precede anything he said or did by approximately 9 hours. I put everything back in order. I closed the folder. I left it in the trunk of my car. I ironed my dress for the morning. It was a deep green wrap dress that I had owned for 4 years and worn to exactly 3 occasions because it is the kind of dress that deserves an occasion. I hung it on the back of the bathroom door. I set my alarm. I went to bed. The restaurant had done it nicely. I will give Daniel that. The private room had warm lighting and round tables with white cloths and a bar set up along one wall, and people were already there when we arrived, including both his parents and my mother, who had driven up from Ripon and was wearing her good cardigan and had her hands folded in her lap the way she does when she is in a room where she is not entirely certain she belongs. I went to her first. I hugged her, and she held on for a moment longer than usual, and when she pulled back, her eyes searched my face, and I gave her a small nod, just barely, and I watched something in her posture settle. Stephanie was there. She arrived 20 minutes into the party, and she was wearing a silk blouse the color of champagne, and she had the practiced ease of someone who had rehearsed entering a room. She hugged Daniel near the bar. I watched from across the room. I watched him put his hand briefly on her arm. I watched his eyes find me and then move away. I held my glass of sparkling water and I let my expression remain exactly as warm as it had been. I need to tell you what happened at 7:42 in the evening, because everything before it was setup and everything after it was consequence. Daniel tapped his glass. The room came to a kind of shuffling quiet, 40 people orienting toward him, and he smiled the smile I had seen for 12 years, the one that opens his whole face, and he began to speak. He talked about 12 years. He talked about gratitude. He talked with a kind of oratorical smoothness I now recognized as rehearsed, about growth, how people grow, how lives grow, how sometimes people grow in different directions, and he wanted to share something with the people he cared about most. He was still smiling, because he believed in honesty, in being genuine, I stepped forward, not dramatically, one step from where I had been standing near the edge of the gathering, toward the center of the room. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. The room was quiet and I was composed, and both of those things were things I had prepared for. I said, "Before you finish, Daniel, I want to say something too." The smile adjusted. He said, almost lightly, "Sure, of course, go ahead." And I told the room, our families, our friends, 40 people who had come to celebrate what they believed was a marriage, that I wanted to share something that I had been holding for 6 weeks, because I also believed in honesty. I said that I had been aware, for 6 weeks, of an ongoing relationship between my husband and his coworker, Stephanie. I named her. I said it without looking at her, keeping my eyes on the room, the way you address a jury rather than a defendant. I said that I had documentation, and that documentation was currently in the custody of my family law attorney in Oshkosh, and that a divorce petition had been filed that morning at 9 a.m., and that I wanted our family and friends to hear this from me directly rather than learn it some other way later. Then I stopped talking. You learn, in litigation support, that silence after a statement is not a void to fill. It is a delivered weight. You let it land. Daniel's father made a sound that was not quite a word. His mother had both hands over her mouth. Renata was standing near the bar, and I could see her without looking at her, the way you can see something in your peripheral field that you have been aware of for the full duration. My mother was at her table with her hands still folded, and I looked at her once, quickly, and she was looking at me, and her eyes were steady and clear, and she was not crying. Daniel said my name. The way he said it had a quality that I had not heard before. Not anger, not the smooth performance, something that was closer to an appeal. I let it land too. Stephanie had gone very still near the bar, the champagne-colored blouse, the practiced ease. She was looking at the middle distance with the expression of someone recalculating their entire position in real time, which I found genuinely understandable. She had not made vows to me. She was not the architecture of my grief. I had not come there for her. I said, "I hope everyone enjoys the evening." I thanked the restaurant, I picked up my bag, and I walked out. Renata caught up with me in the parking lot. She did not say anything. She just walked next to me to my car, and when I got to it, I stood there for a moment with my keys in my hand, and I took a breath that was longer and deeper than anything I had breathed in 6 weeks, and I let it out slowly. She put one hand on my arm. I said, "Okay, She said, okay. That was the whole conversation. What followed was, in the procedural sense, a process. It was not clean or fast. Nothing in family law is. What I can tell you is what the record shows. Patricia filed the petition that morning, as scheduled, with full documentation attached. The credit card statements were there, the hotel charges, the timeline. Daniel retained an attorney within the week. Wisconsin's community property framework meant the house was divided on the basis of equitable interest. The mortgage had been carried jointly for 9 years, and the improvement investment, the 3 years of weekend work, the materials we had bought at the lumber supply in Neenah and hauled home in our truck, was documented in the receipts I had kept in a home folder since we started, because I am my mother's daughter, and my mother kept every receipt. The house sold 14 months later. My share of the equity was enough to put a down payment on a smaller house in a neighborhood I liked, with a yard that backs up to a creek that freezes in January and makes a sound in March when it starts to move again that I find unreasonably comforting. The retirement accounts were split per the marital asset calculation. The joint savings were divided. Daniel moved into Riverton Commons, which I noted closed escrow about 6 weeks after the party, meaning he had been further along in that planning than even I had understood. I filed that away somewhere interior and let it complete its process there. My mother called the Monday after the party, as she always calls on Sunday, but had waited 1 extra day this time, I think out of respect for whatever I might need the day immediately after to be. She said she was proud of me. She said she had known, from the moment I nodded at her across the room, that I had a handle on it. She said, and I am going to give you this exactly. She said that her mother always told her that a woman who keeps her composure in a hard room is a woman who has done her work beforehand. She said she had watched me do that all my life. I held the phone for a moment without saying anything. Then I said, "The dress looked good, Mom." She laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind that starts in her chest and doesn't apologize for itself, which is where I learned that laugh, which is where I learned everything I know about how to survive something without becoming smaller than you were before it. 3 things I took from this. First, document before you act. Whatever you are seeing, before you do anything else, write it down, date it, photograph it, preserve it. Not because you are planning something, because you deserve a record of what actually happened, and because whoever comes later, an attorney, a judge, yourself at 3 in the morning, will need it. Second, your composure is not passivity. Staying quiet is not the same as accepting something. Some of the most decisive actions I took in those 6 weeks were taken in complete silence, and none of them were passive. Third, the people who believe a public setting will make you smaller are counting on a version of you that you are not required to be. The room is just a room. You decide what you do in it. To Daniel, I am not angry. I want you to know that. Anger is a second-hand emotion, and I have been too busy building something to carry it. I hope you figure out what you actually want from your life. I hope Riverton Commons has good soundproofing. I am in the new house now. It is smaller. The yard backs up to the creek. In February, I found a pair of cardinals in the overgrown shrub along the back fence, the male bright as a wound, the female the color of dried leaves in winter grass, both of them utterly unfazed by the cold. I watched them from the window for a long time. I called my mother that evening. She asked how the house was settling. I said, "Pretty well." She said, "You sound like yourself again." I said, "Yeah, Mom, I think I do." My question for you is this. If you had found what I found that morning in that bedroom at 7:14 with the water still running, how long would you have waited before you moved? Not what would you have done, how long? Because I think the answer to that question tells you something about yourself that is worth knowing. If this story hit you somewhere real, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, share it with the person who needs to hear it. I'll see you soon.